Okay, good morning. We will be having our case discussion today. A case of cervical node metastasis with unknown primary. It's a very common case in both MS and DNB examination. Dr. Saurabh Ghosh is Professor of Surgical Oncology at Calcutta Medical College. Will take us through this case. So we'll have a nice discussion, I think. Dr. Chandrakant Maurya, who is our third year resident at MR Mangur, will present the case. Dr. Chandrakant, please.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, teachers and my dear friends. So I'm going to present a case today. Mr. X, a 54-year-old gentleman from Sundarban, tailor by profession, presented to the surgery OPD with chip complaint, swelling in the left upper part of the neck for 6 months. History of present illness. The patient was apparently well 6 months back when he noticed a swelling in the left upper part of the neck, which was insidious in onset. Initially, the swelling was about 1 into 1 centimeter, and there is a rapid increase in size for the last 4 months to attain a present size of approximately 4 into 3 centimeter. There is no other swelling in the contralateral neck and head and any other part of the body. There is no history of pain over the swelling. There is no history of any skin changes, discharge, or swelling. But he gives the history of loss of appetite for the last 3 months. There is no history of fever, no history of pain, abdomen, distension, or jaundice, no history of altered bowel, bladder and bowel habits, no alteration of voice or stridor, no difficulty in breathing, swallowing, no history of chest pain, cough, hemoptysis, or breathlessness, no history of headache, loss of consciousness, vomiting, or symptoms of any cranial nerve palsy. There is no history of otalgia. Past history, no major medical illness in the past, no history of any surgery done in the past, no history of any radiation given in the past. He is not a known case of hypertension or diabetes. Personal history, he is married and has wife and 2 children. All of them are healthy. He consumes a mixed diet, bladder and bowel habits are normal, but he is a smoker for last 10 years and smokes 8 to 10 BDs per day. Family history, his mother is alive and healthy. Father died due to a natural cause. There is no other sibling. Treatment history, there is no history of any treatment given. Allergic history, there is no history of any allergy to food or drug. Summary of the history.
So, sir, can we stop him at this point and ask?
You can summarize and then you start.
Okay.
A 54-year-old gentleman presented with a swelling in the left upper part of the neck for last 6 months, insidious in onset. Initially, it was about 1 centimeter and rapidly increasing in size to attain the present size of 4 into 3 centimeters. There is no history of any skin change or discharge from the swelling. There is no history of pain over the swelling, no history of fever, no history of any other swelling in the other part of head or neck. He has a history of decreased appetite. His bladder and bowel habits are normal, no difficulty in breathing and swallowing, no chest pain, cough, hemoptysis, or otalgia, no major illness in the past.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so since this is a swelling in the neck, what are the possibilities that you're thinking of at this point, just from the history? Suppose just the presenting complaint, he doesn't have too many complaints, just a swelling in the neck. So how do you approach a swelling in the neck?
So first, the swelling can arise from can be due to lymphadenopathy. The causes can be in India. Common causes can be tuberculous lymphadenitis or lymphoma. Or
would you like to before that, would you like to divide the area of the swelling? Just from the history, he has said that the swelling is at one particular site, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
He has said it is in the left upper part.
Yes, sir.
So swellings in the neck can be divided into
upper and lower part.
No. That is not very common. Not upper and lower part. The commoner division is midline swellings and lateral swellings.
Midline and lateral swellings. Yes,
there is a certain number of possibilities for a midline swelling, and there are certain number of possibilities for a lateral swelling.
Yes, sir.
So this patient is giving a history of a lateral swelling.
Yes, sir.
So then further history will be directed at the various lateral swellings that are there in the neck. So you have to keep it in mind that way. So you are mentioning otalgia. Why otalgia?
So
you mentioned a negative history of otalgia specifically. You mentioned that. Why?
So otalgia means there is a referred pain if there is a carcinoma or some tumor involving the in the buccal cavity. That can be referred. That can have a referred pain in the ear.
How? What is the mechanism?
Sir, referred from.
You are correct. You are quite correct. That is the cause. But you have to tell me the mechanism.
Why does the eustachian tube opens?
Some middle ear.
Eustachian tube opens in the middle ear. So that is the one end. Which oral part? Where does it open?
In the lateral pharyngeal. In the lateral pharyngeal.
Lateral pharyngeal.
Nasopharynx. In the nasopharynx, isn't it? Torus tuberis. Behind the fossa of Rosenmuller. Okay. So, and other than that, in the oral cavity also, glossopharyngeal nerve is supplying sensory. There is a tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve. So through that, again, there may be referred pain to the ear. So it is very good that you have mentioned it, but you should also know the cause behind it. Okay, then you didn't say anything about the nose. Any discharge from the nose, any bloody discharge from the nose, any history of nasal blockage?
No, sir.
I missed it. Did you mention it?
Yes, it should be mentioned. There is no issue.
Okay, fine. Carry on.
Coming to the examination part, the general survey. I have examined the patient in a well-lit room after taking the proper consent, and the patient is conscious, alert, cooperative, and well-oriented to time, place, and person. His ECOG performance status is 1. He is well-nourished, well-hydrated. There is no pallor, no icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, no cervical lymphadenopathy, no supraclavicular lymphadenopathy,
no cervical lymphadenopathy.
Sir, no, sir, that was it's okay.
And say I will discuss this in the local examination.
Sir. I will discuss that.
There is cervical lymphadenopathy, which I will mention in greater details in my local examination. Okay.
There is no supraclavicular lymphadenopathy and no pedal edema. Coming to the vitals, the pulse rate is 90 per minute and regular. Blood pressure is 124 by 80 millimeter of Hg in the right arm in supine position. Temperature is 98.6 degree Fahrenheit. Respiratory rate 16 per minute. Now local examination. The examination of the head and neck. It has been done in the position. Inspection. A swelling noted in the left upper part of the neck at the level of upper border of the thyroid cartilage, 5 centimeter above the clavicle. It is globular in shape, size approximately 4 into 3 centimeters, smooth surface and margin well defined. The mass was mobile. The skin over the swelling appears normal.
Mobile on inspection. You said mobile, or did I hear something else?
You look for respiratory mobility. Is it required at all?
Mobile is a palpatory finding unless you are talking about midline swellings where you look for mobility on
palpation,
on deglutition. On deglutition. That is for midline swellings. For a lateral neck swelling, nobody checks for movement on deglutition, isn't it? It will be very silly. So mobility is not an inspectory finding. Carry on, please.
Skin over the swelling appears normal. There is no pigmentation, no engorged veins, no visible pulsation.
Are you expecting a pigmentation? What could be the possible abnormality of the skin in a lateral neck swelling?
Sir, in advanced metastatic tumor.
Why metastatic tumor? Has someone told you that this is a metastatic tumor? This is just a neck swelling. So what are the abnormalities that you can expect? One possibility is metastatic tumor, okay, but is that the only possibility?
No, sir, there are various possibilities.
So what other skin changes can you expect? You have said no pigmentation. What pigmentation will you expect in the skin? I would expect a sinus or puckering or discharge.
What secondary change can happen?
Ulcerations can be there, sinus formation can be there.
And what about skin change? Other skin change. If it is a metastatic node, what can happen to the skin?
Fixity to the skin.
Edema, the erythema, ulceration, nodule. These can happen in the skin. Okay.
The swelling does not move on swallowing or protrusion of the tongue.
So again, sir, I would like Professor Shah's opinion on this. It is clearly a lateral swelling he is mentioning. Sir, does he have to mention that does not move on swallowing or protrusion
No,
of
not
tongue?
at all. Not. It's not required.
Upper neck swelling in the left, why will it move? For a midline swelling, for a lower ear swelling where thyroid lateral lobe swellings can present as a lateral swelling, but at least it will be in the lower neck. It cannot be at level 2, at the level of the thyroid cartilage.
Yeah.
So here I think you should not mention this.
Yes, yes.
On palpation, there is no local rise of temperature. It's non-tender. For the swelling, it is a palpable swelling on the left side of the neck, lying partly deep to the sternocleidomastoid muscle at the level of upper
How
border.
do you know it is deep to the sternomastoid?
Sir, by insinuating our fingers, we can find it.
Just like that. When the patient is sitting normally and you insinuate your finger.
What else?
Or you ask the patient to do something.
How is the relation of the sternomastoid delineated? A swelling there and sternomastoid relation is delineated by what? How do you contract the sternomastoid?
You have to make the sternomastoid taut, na? So you can do that. So suppose it's the left-sided. And so if you don't want to go into that controversy, what can you do? Opposite side, same side, you will forget in the exam. You'll get confused. What can you do? Yes. So just put your hand below the mentum and ask him to push the head down. Then both sternomastoids will get contracted. And then you can assess, once the sternomastoid is contracted, it is tight, then you can assess whether the swelling is deep to the tight sternomastoid or it is superficial to it. In a relaxed state, it is very difficult to say clinically whether the swelling is going deep to the sternomastoid or not. You have to make the muscle taut. Okay.
Sir. The mass of 4 into 3 centimeter in size, that is globular in shape, smooth surface with well-defined margin. The consistency is hard and it is the skin and the underlying structures. Okay. There is no other lymph node palpable in the neck.
How did you know it is free from the underlying structures?
We'll see the fixity. We'll
how will you check the fixity? How?
Which structure this can be fixed if you talk of deep structure in this region?
Sir, deep cervical fascia.
Okay.
Deep to that. Deep to that. It can be in the carotid sheath.
Carotid sheath.
Deep to that. What structures are there? Deep to carotid sheath. Prevertebral muscles. And deep to that, cervical vertebrae. So if you are asked to test for the mobility of the swelling to the underlying structures, what do you do?
So first we'll make the muscle relax.
Yes. Muscle is relaxed.
After that, we'll hold the mass
swelling.
Swelling. Yes. Move it in the this position.
Side to side. Side to side. Then. So in two axes you have to move. So yes. if it is adherent to the carotid sheath, if you move it side to side, it will move along with the carotid sheath because that is a longitudinally oriented structure. It will have certain amount of side to side movement. But when you try to move it above downwards, you may not be able to do that if it is adherent to the carotid. So you have to test the mobility in two axes, not just side to side. You have to see side to side as well as above downwards. Okay, carry on.
If it is fixed to the prevertebral muscle, what will happen? If it is fixed to the prevertebral muscle and the underlying bone,
it will
fix
not move at all.
No muscle need to be contracted.
It will not move at all.
No muscle need to be contracted. If you just try to move, it is fixed as such without any muscle being contracted. It is fixed to the underlying prevertebral muscle and the vertebral body.
And no other lymph nodes are palpable in the neck, and the carotid pulsations can be felt bilaterally at their normal positions.
Okay. Go on. Is it compressible? It is not compressible. You said it is hard. Again, compressibility will not be. Yes, okay.
Now coming to the detailed examination of the scalp, there is no growth found. Examination of the oral cavity, no growth in the oral cavity, lips, tongue, floor of the mouth, hard palate, both the tonsils, retromolar trigone.
So you are including both the tonsils in the oral cavity. No, I'm just asking for a clarification. Are the tonsils part of the oral cavity? Because you have mentioned all oral, you've said examination of oral cavity, and then you are specifically mentioning certain sites, which is fine. But why are you adding tonsil to it? Tonsil is not part of oral cavity. Part of oral cavity
is... If you go by boundary, this is the oral cavity, but once you ask the patient to open the mouth, then you can see up to these regions.
But then you should also add lateral pharyngeal wall and posterior pharyngeal wall. If you open the mouth, it is not just the tonsils that you can see. You can see the posterior pharyngeal wall also, part of it, not entire part. You can see the lateral pharyngeal wall. Then you have to mention that also. Okay. Don't add the 5 subsides of oral cavity and say tonsil along with it. Head neck surgeon will object. Okay. Tonsil is part of oropharynx, not oral cavity.
Examination of the thyroid. Thyroid gland is not palpable. And the examination of nasal cavity, it is normal.
Okay, fair enough.
Going to the systemic examination, the gastrointestinal system. Per abdominal, it is soft, not tender. No organomegaly is noted. It is non-distracted and no free fluid was noted. Cardiovascular system, S1, S2 heart sounds are heard, no murmurs. In CNS, no focal neurological deficit. In respiratory system, normal vesicular breath sounds were heard. Now coming to the summary. A 54-year-old gentleman presented with a swelling in the left upper part of the neck for last 6 months, insidious in onset. Initially, the swelling was 1 into 1 centimeter and rapidly increasing in size to attain the present size of 4 into 3 centimeter. There is no history of pain over the swelling, no history of swelling in the contralateral neck or the head or any other part of the body. No history of fever, cough, hemoptysis or chest pain, no difficulty in swallowing, no alteration of voice. On examination, the general survey is normal. On local examination, there is a swelling in the left side of the neck, lying partly deep to the sternocleidomastoid muscle at the level of upper border of thyroid cartilage. There is no changes over the swelling. On palpation, 4 into 3 centimeter size swelling is palpable, which is globular in shape, hard in consistency, non-tender, has a smooth surface and well-defined margins, not fixed to the overlying skin or the underlying structures. There is no other lymph nodes palpable. There is no growth in the oral cavity, tongue, and thyroid is not palpable.
So what's your provisional diagnosis? At this stage, you have to come up with a provisional diagnosis, isn't it?
Sir. This is probably a case of metastatic carcinoma of the left cervical lymph node with unknown primary.
Okay. Would you like to keep a list of differential diagnosis? Or is this the only possible diagnosis?
There are provisional diagnoses for this.
I want differential diagnosis.
Differential diagnosis.
Tell me 4 or 5.
So tubercular lymphadenitis, cervical lymphadenitis can be there.
Okay. Then?
Sir, lymphoma can be there.
Then?
Sir, chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
Okay.
Chronic pyogenic leukemia.
No,
pyogenic leukemia?
Pyogenic, yeah.
Chronic non-specific infection. Chronic
lymphadenitis. Okay, yes, it can be that. So all lymph nodes differential diagnosis, no extra lymphatic differential diagnosis. Elderly male.
So
could it be a soft tissue tumor? It can be a soft tissue sarcoma.
Soft tissue sarcoma.
If you are giving a history of a rapid growth, short and rapid growth. Suppose the history was of a slightly longer duration. Say for a couple of years, he is noticing there is hardly any growth and the swelling was a little higher up. You're saying this is at the level of the thyroid cartilage. Instead of that, maybe it was at the level of the hyoid bone. Then what? Any other possibility? Slow growing swelling, male patient, elderly male,
What
60s.
structure is there? Another gland there in this location?
Submandibular gland.
Yes.
Then tumor arising from submandibular gland.
Okay, what about if it is a little more lateral? Say it is below the sternum. No? This swelling is below the sternum, right? A little higher up. Slow growing swelling.
Any tumor from the pelvic sheath region? Both sides a slow growing tumor. Carotid body tumor.
Carotid body tumor you have to keep in mind, no? For a higher swelling. Okay, so it's fine. So you have mentioned 4 or 5 differential diagnoses. Always try to keep an open mind in the exam. Otherwise, examiner will get irritated. He will know that you have been told the diagnosis.
Yeah.
So just because you know the diagnosis is a CA or a metastatic cancer, you should not force your diagnosis on him. You should keep an open mind. And then he will ask, so instead of all the differential diagnosis, you have come to this particular differential diagnosis. Why is it so? So what are the points in favor of your diagnosis in the history? What are the points in favor of your diagnosis in the examination? Just brief, important positive points.
So from the history, we can conclude, we have seen that the patient is old age patient and he has a history of smoking for last 10 years. And in the examination, we have found that there is single enlarged lymph node that has a characteristic. It is hard in filling. It is hard in consistency.
So how will a lymphoma node will be on palpation? What will be the palpatory finding for a lymphoma?
The classic description of a lymphoma node. Classic description.
Sir, rubbery.
Okay. Lobulated, rubbery, discrete nodes. Okay. What about tuberculosis? Why can it not be tuberculosis? If there is smoker, elderly male, tuberculosis is also a common association.
What is the cancer? Tubercular?
No, start from history. In the history, you have mentioned important negative points.
The first, tuberculosis is quite common, so it can happen in any age group. And
so I am asking for negative points. You don't say this is tuberculosis, is
what
it?
Should have been, what maybe there in the history that which will suggest it might be tubercular node?
Tubercular cervical lymphadenopathy, is it the primary phenomenon or is it generally secondary?
It's secondary.
So if it is secondary, then where is the primary?
Primary mostly in the lungs, the pulmonary.
So what will be the lung symptoms?
There could be chest symptoms like cough, hemoptysis.
So is it there? Is it there in the history?
No, sir.
Fever, low-grade fever. Every day he will have low-grade fever with evening rise. He may give a history of family history being positive. He may give history of previous treatment for tuberculosis. Is any of this present?
No, sir. And weight loss also it can be there.
Weight loss may be there, but weight loss is non-specific. It can be there for cancer also.
So, even loss of appetite is non-specific. Loss of appetite is also there in tuberculosis.
Both tuberculosis and yeah. So these are the things you say, sir. There is no history of cough. There is no history of chest pain. There is no history of tuberculosis in the family or for his personal treatment in the past history. So in the history, there are no points which are strongly favoring tuberculosis. So I will keep tuberculosis as a lower differential diagnosis, lesser possibility.
Sir.
This is how you say. Okay, carry on. So now how will you confirm your diagnosis?
I would like to do some investigations to support my diagnosis.
What?
Confirm my diagnosis. So first I will do some non-invasive radiological investigation.
Such as
ultrasonography of the swelling.
Of what? Ultrasonography just with the swelling.
Swelling and neck.
Say ultrasonography of the neck. Okay, what are the information that you're looking for in ultrasound?
Sir, I would like to see the extent of the swelling, the underlying structures, whether the involvement to the
underlying structure involvement on the ultrasound. Before that,
sir, the nodes, any other nodes.
Okay, any other nodes? The characteristic of the swelling itself, whether it is solid or whether it is cystic, that ultrasound will tell you very nicely whether it is partly solid, partly cystic.
So ultrasound initially of the swelling itself, characterization of the swelling. You are saying lymph nodes. a metastatic node has got a typical characteristic in ultrasonography.
Sure.
What are the classic appearance of metastatic node in ultrasonography?
First, the shape of the node.
First is size.
Size.
Normal nodes are usually less than 5 millimeters. Okay, size.
Sure.
You said you're only 2 centimeters.
1.5. More than 1.5 you have to take.
That is metastatic. Then the shape of the node.
Pathological, not metastatic. See, again, it is not necessarily pathological on the size. I mean, no, not metastatic.
And normal
Just
shape
say
is what?
pathological.
Normal shape is bean shaped.
Normal is bean shaped or kidney shaped.
Kidney shaped. And that in a malignant or a pathological node, it changes into a round or oval shape.
Then
Oval shape.
what you see in the center of the node in a normal node, if you do ultrasonography, central area is hypoechoic or hyperechoic?
Sir, in normal is hypoechoic.
Yes.
And
is a medulla is a hypoechoic. And if it is
fatty hilum, that is the fatty hilum.
Yeah.
And perinodal halo is lost.
Yes.
Okay.
And
the surface.
And what about the outline of the node? If you see a normal node, you have an outline. Outline is smooth or irregular?
Sir, normal is smooth, but in case of pathologic
node, you can have extracapsular extension. You can see the breach in the capsule. That you can see. And if you apply color coding, if you apply color Doppler in this ultrasonography,
intranodal and perinodal vascularity, increased vascularity, isn't it?
Increased vascularity. So that is a lymph node itself. And you said ultrasound of the neck. So ultrasound can delineate some other findings in the neck. You have palpated one node. Ultrasound can show other nodes. And apart from this, what else ultrasound can pick up? Very important in the neck for evaluation.
Yes, very important.
Where you may have occult tumor. You may have occult tumor picked up by ultrasonography. You have done a clinical examination for that, but clinical examination is not 100% reliable.
Yes, thyroid.
Yes.
Thyroid swelling
in the thyroid.
Submandibular gland. There may be small focal lesion in the submandibular or the parotid gland. It will be impossible to pick
evaluate the salivary glands and the thyroid gland.
Thyroid and salivary glands. You have to maintain.
Because these are the glands where we have small tumors. Because the basic pathology in unknown primary is that primary is not discernible because of size, and patient has no symptoms. So your idea is to do some investigation to pick up the primary, because the primary may dictate the mode of treatment. Okay, so you've done ultrasonography.
Yes, sir.
Nothing much apart from this clinical corroboration of the node. Yes. What next?
And they have said thyroid is normal. They have said salivary glands are normal. Yeah. Now what? And no other nodes.
Then I would like to proceed with invasive technique like FNAC of the swelling.
Okay.
And apart from FNAC, FNAC will differentiate. It will give the histological profile of the swelling, depending.
Histological or cytological?
Cytological.
So what about if you want a histological profile, what can you do?
Sir, open or excisional biopsy.
Excision biopsy for a 4 centimeter lesion.
Or why need an incision biopsy? There are now good way of taking good chunk of biopsy.
So true cut biopsy can be
true cut biopsy. Say true cut. Suppose you are very eager to get a histology for some reason. You have done the FNAC once. It has come out to be inconclusive. Then true cut biopsy, ultrasound guided or just clinical. If it's very large swelling, just ordinary true cut biopsy can be done. Okay. Yes, what are the advantages?
Advantages of
true cut biopsy over FNAC?
Sir, it can differentiate between invasiveness. Invasive.
In this case, if it is a nodal swelling and there is a malignant cell there, obviously it is invasive. This is not the primary. This is not like a breast cancer where you are trying to distinguish between a ductal carcinoma in situ versus an invasive ductal carcinoma. If there is even a single cancer cell in the lymph node, then it is invasive. It has come from somewhere else, isn't it?
Yes.
So that is not the important thing. What are the ways in which a true cut can help over an FNAC? it can, if there is other pathology like lymphoma and all, sometimes just on an FNAC, high-grade lymphoma and a poorly differentiated carcinoma, it is very difficult to distinguish. So a true cut biopsy, which will give more tissue, will be able to help the pathologist. Then in those rare cases where there is a definite non-mucosal primary, like from the salivary gland, like from the thyroid gland, these are also known sites for occult primary with cervical lymph node metastasis. Here again, if they just give an FNAC, sometimes the pathologist may not be able to clearly say whether the origin is from the thyroid or they will just say this is a malignant cell. They may not say squamous. They may not use the word squamous, but they will not be able to give you a definite primary origin. But if you give tissue, then they can do a histological examination. They can do IHC on that, and that will help them to come up with a possible origin, site of origin.
Primary.
Can you do IHC with a FNAC specimen? Is it possible to do IHC on FNAC specimen?
Yes,
do you have any idea?
Yes, it can be done.
How do you do it? FNAC is just a few scattered cells, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So what do you have to do then?
You have to
you have to make a cell block. There is something known as a cell block. You have to take quite a few aspirates and then put them in a medium and centrifuge them. And that residuant, the residue at the bottom, those are the cells. Then you take them out and freeze them into a block. That gives you a sufficient number of cells together, and then you can do IHC staining on that. So you have to use the term cell block after centrifugation of the cytology sample. So it is possible to do IHC even on FNAC, but it is a more complicated thing. To have tissue is better. Anyway, carry on. So you have done the FNAC. Suppose the FNAC report comes out to be metastatic carcinoma. That is all they say.
Yeah.
Metastatic carcinoma cells. Now what? Before that, one question I would like to ask you. You did the ultrasound. Ultrasound says that this hard swelling in the neck, it is predominantly cystic. Does that give you some clue, or it is predominantly cystic? There are solid areas in between. Can you tell me any subsite in the head neck where cystic lymph nodal metastases are common?
Sir, in entire head neck, thyroid can have both.
Okay, thyroid, yes. Papillary thyroid cancers are also known to have cystic degeneration of the cervical lymph nodes. But I'm talking about mucosal cancers, not glandular cancers. Oropharyngeal, HPV associated cervical lymphadenopathy is known to be cystic. So you have to, if you get a cystic and it is squamous, it is not thyroid, then you have to think of oropharynx as the likely primary site. Okay. Carry on. So FNAC says malignant cells seen.
Yes, sir.
Then what next?
And I would like to do some further investigations to see
what investigations?
So first we can go for CT scan of the head and neck vision, and along with CT scan of the chest.
I think at this stage, you should directly go for something more than a CT scan, CT scan alone may not be able to pick up the primary site. What is the aim of doing it? Now you are confirmed that it is a metastatic lymph node, isn't it? FNAC has said it is malignant. So, and based on there are no other nodes, there is no other peripheral lymphadenopathy on clinical examination, the elderly male, it is unlikely to be lymphoma or leukemia. Not impossible, but unlikely. Solitary big node. So you are looking for a primary site, like sir said, because that will have an impact on the management. So is there any test that you have which is slightly better than a CT scan in trying to pick up an unknown primary site? Imaging test.
PET scan.
PET CT scan. So PET, not just PET scan, say PET CT scan. So that is, I think, a standard recommendation for any patient who presents with an unknown primary with cervical lymph nodal metastasis, especially if it is mucosal, squamous carcinoma. So you can say, I will do a CT scan first and then do a PET CT scan. But in my OPD practice, I would never write that. I would directly write a PET CT scan.
And will you do endoscopy first? I mean,
sir, I will not go for first or second. You have to do pan endoscopy. You also have to do a PET CT scan.
Yeah.
So neither of them are in my hand. I will send the patient, and the patient will get a date. He will get a date from the PET CT scan. He will get a date from ENT for laryngoscopy. He will get a date from gastroenterology for upper GI endoscopy. None of them are in my hand. So I cannot really control which is first or which is second. This will not have much impact.
Yeah, because limitation of CT scan is after ultrasound, finding a lesion in CT scan again will be very difficult. And that way PET CT scores, because PET CT is not finding the mass lesion, it's finding the metabolically active area. And then endoscopy can visualize a small surface lesion. So that should be the workup, not saying the CT first. You can do a CT scan for planning. If you have a PET CT uptake in one area, then you ask for a CT scan and confine your interest in that area, whether you can pick up any lesion in that side.
The PET CT scan will give you the CT also. The PET CT scan, generally there is a 128 slice or at least a 64 slice CT machine associated with the PET. So you will get the CT images anyway. Yeah. So in one test, you will get the CT, plus you will get an additional information in the form
because
of
that is a standard recommendation for, particularly if you have a head neck lesion. You may have abdominal disease. If you have a lymph node which is in the level 4 area, then it is said that it is likely to be some infraclavicular disease.
Correct.
Maybe from lungs or some esophagus or other abdominal site. In that case, PET CT is not the first indication to ask for, because they are not all PET avid adenosine. But for head neck lesion, yes, PET CT is the primary invasive. Agree.
So, so what is pan endoscopy? When we say, sir was saying it will be like to do endoscopy, what are the endoscopies that you will do or advise?
Sir, pan endoscopy, it includes laryngoscopy.
Nasal endoscopy. Nasal endoscopy.
Esophagobronchoscopy.
So separate. Esophagobronchoscopy एक साथ कैसे?
Upper GI endoscopy.
So bronchoscopy or laryngobronchoscopy, upper GI endoscopy and nasal endoscopy. This is pan endoscopy. So what are the possible occult sites in the head neck region which can give rise to this kind of cervical lymphadenopathy without presenting as a primary?
So first, starting from buccal cavity, it starts from CA tongue.
Where? CA tongue. Where?
Anterior tongue lesion will be seen. Even a small ulcer will be seen.
Base of
so that is not oral cavity. Base of the tongue is oropharynx. This much you have to keep in mind. Oropharynx is base tongue, tonsil, lateral pharyngeal wall. Okay.
Yes,
and soft palate. Sorry. Soft palate also. Hard palate is oral cavity. Soft palate is oropharynx. So base tongue. Yes, that is a very, very important side. Even more important than base tongue.
On this side?
On the side? अभी तो बोला oral cavity.
Fossa of Rosenmuller.
Tonsil, Baba. Tonsil. Then fossa of Rosenmuller, yes, that is also important. But that is in nasopharynx. Fossa of Rosenmuller is in nasopharynx. Yes, that is a very important occult site. But the most common occult site for all head and neck squamous carcinoma presenting with cervical lymphadenopathy is tonsil, and tonsil. Okay. So if you don't get anything on the PET CT scan also, some guidelines say you should do a blind biopsy of both tonsils. Both the tonsils. And in almost 25% cases, you will get a positive result. So most
and I think there is a role for tonsillectomy also.
Tonsillectomy, yes, you can. Such tonsil, a normal unenlarged tonsil is such a small thing that taking a biopsy means effectively doing the tonsillectomy itself. You have to, how much is the tonsil? You can remove the tonsil. Bilateral tonsillectomy you can do. British guidelines say you should, if it is a unknown primary, even at the end of the PET CT scan, then you should do bilateral tonsillectomies. Okay. So don't forget tonsil, don't forget base of tongue, don't forget fossa of Rosenmuller. Palate you can see. It is unlikely that there will be an ulcer or growth in the palate and you will not be able to see it. But these things you will not be able to see. It's a very small lesion, may be difficult to find because the surface is irregular. Okay. Then what next? So you have done the PET CT scan. PET CT scan shows a lesion, say in the. What are the other possible? Sorry, what were the other possible sites? Are these the only possible sites? We have covered nasopharynx. We have covered oropharynx. Anything else?
Now buccal cavity.
Buccal cavity unlikely to be
Easily
unknown
see.
primary. You can
No.
see it.
Other than that, all the salivary glands, the parotid gland, submandibular gland.
Okay, salivary glands, but you have done an ultrasound. And I am saying this is a mucosal cancer. This is not a glandular cancer. So forget thyroid, forget salivary glands. Anything else? How about larynx? How about hypopharynx? These are possible sites. Small growth, subglottic growth in the larynx, or a piriform sinus growth, or a post-cricoid growth. These can also give rise to cervical lymph node metastasis. So larynx and hypopharynx, you have to keep in mind. These are not easily visualized. Even on endoscopic examination, a small lesion can be missed. So you have to keep these in mind. Okay. So oropharynx, nasopharynx, larynx, and hypopharynx. And definitely thyroid and salivary gland also for glandular cancers. Okay. So these are the possible sites. Now you have done a PET CT scan. Suppose the PET CT that you have done three patients. One has got a, say, base tongue lesion on the PET CT scan. One has got a hypopharyngeal lesion and one has got a salivary gland lesion. Now what?
Base of the tongue, hypopharynx, and salivary gland. Will the approach be same in all three?
Sorry, sir.
One question. In PET CT,
this is real right.
Saying one patient is showing some uptake in the salivary gland, suspicion of a mass lesion there, yes, and you have a node.
Yes, sir.
Another patient is a base tongue lesion,
yes, sir,
with node. Another patient hypopharyngeal lesion and the node. What will be
and
your
the fourth patient has no uptake anywhere except the node. He has only got the node. Even after PET CT scan and triple endoscopy, you don't find
the ideal case of unknown primary.
Unknown primary. So one is absolute unknown primary. Now what? Quickly, don't waste time. There's only 1 hour. We will not be able to discuss.
Yes, sir. Then we can go for a modified.
When? In all 4 scenarios. If you have a salivary gland with the node, the approach should be go for MRND, which will take the salivary gland out and with that. If it is a base tongue lesion, will you remove the tongue?
Actually, sir, probably it is not fair to ask them. They are not used to handling oropharynx and hypopharynx. By and large, the treatment of oropharynx and hypopharynx like base tongue or larynx, it is non-operative. It is radical radiotherapy because the operation is very morbid. So if you are doing radiotherapy for the primary lesion, if it is not a very large node, then it makes sense to try to cover the neck node also with radiotherapy. So the treatment may be radical chemoradiation for the primary and the neck node. But with one caveat, you should remember that radiotherapy or chemoradiotherapy does not work very well if the node is very large in size. So for a 5-6 centimeter node, for a necrotic node with partly cystic degeneration, even after radiotherapy, there may be a residual nodal mass. The primary may disappear because but cervical lymph node may persist. So in that case, you may have to go for salvage surgery. I think that is enough for you to know for oropharynx and hypopharynx and larynx. Generally treated, primary is treated with radical radiotherapy. If the node is small, that will also be treated with radiotherapy and chemotherapy simultaneous concurrent. If it is a large node, then you might consider upfront surgery or you might have to do a salvage surgery after the course of radiation is complete. So now you come to the gland, sir has already mentioned. You will consider surgery, of course. If it's a parotid gland tumor, then you will do a surgery for the primary tumor, and along with that, you will also do the ipsilateral neck dissection. What about the fourth case, where there is no primary, there is just the cervical lymph node?
So again, I would like to go for modified radical node dissection.
Modified radical neck dissection. Achha. So before that, what are the possible levels of lymph nodes in the neck?
Yes, sir. There are 6 level of lymph nodes.
Mm-hmm.
First is first 1A and 1B. 1A is submental, submandibular. Second is level 2, upper jugular. Third is
what is upper jugular? What is upper jugular? You have to tell me anatomical boundaries.
Upper jugular nodes are the nodes between the base of the skull and bifurcation.
Very good.
Carotid.
Base of the
skull.
surface you find the mastoid. You see, deep to the mastoid is the area you cannot palpate the base of the skull.
So that is mastoid.
And the lower bony boundaries.
That is hyoid.
Hyoid bone. Correct. Then level 3.
It is middle jugular.
Hyoid to
cricothyroid membrane.
Cricoid cartilage. Cricoid cartilage.
Yes, cricoid cartilage.
Cricoid cartilage.
Achha.
Then the lower.
Level 4. Level 4.
So level 4 is lower jugular
boundary.
Node. That is from cricoid cartilage to the
up to
clavicle.
Okay. What about level 5? Boundaries?
And 5 is posterior triangle. That boundary is posteriorly the anterior border of the trapezius, and anteriorly is the lateral border of the sternocleidomastoid.
Posterior border of sternocleidomastoid. Okay, never.
And below is the clavicle.
Middle third of the clavicle. Middle third of the clavicle. Posterior triangle is further divided into. Posterior triangle is further divided into other triangles, smaller triangles. Can you name them?
I can't recall.
Omohyoid crosses.
Triangle and subclavian
triangle. Crosses the area. What is that triangle? Down below? Supraclavicular triangle.
Or subclavian triangle. Subclavian triangle. The inferior belly of omohyoid, posterior superiorly. The posterior border of the sternomastoid, anterior superiorly, and the middle third of the clavicle inferiorly. And above that is the suboccipital triangle. Okay. Fine. So these are the. Can you tell me the NCCN or TNM classification of neck flow?
Nodal.
N0 is.
We know N0. Then say.
Sir, starting from N1, we can start the nodal status. The metastasis to the cervical lymph node. The size being less.
Any cervical lymph node. Any cervical lymph node.
On one side.
Ipsilateral.
Ipsilateral cervical lymph node, size less than 3 centimeter.
So solitary ipsilateral lymph node less than 3 centimeter in size. Then
and no external extension.
No external
extension. Correct.
No external nodal extension. Then N2A ABC. N2A is ipsilateral cervical lymph node, metastasis to ipsilateral cervical lymph node, size more than 3 centimeter, but less than 6 centimeter.
Good.
With no extranodal extension.
Good.
Then 2B is size metastasis to cervical lymph node, more than 3 centimeter, but less than 6 centimeter. Multiple.
More than 3, not more than 3. Multiple ipsilateral cervical lymph node, none more than 6 centimeter.
None
they
more
can
than
be less
6
than 3 also. They can be 2 centimeter. They can be 1 centimeter. But if there are more than 1, then it becomes N2B.
So, then 2C is contralateral or bilateral cervical lymph node.
None more than?
None more than 6 centimeter.
And without any extranodal extension.
Nodal extension.
Yeah. Okay. Then what is N3?
N3 is more than 6 centimeter with extranodal extension.
Or extranodal extension. Fine, fine. So what was your case? What is your case?
The size ipsilateral cervical lymph node, single node, more than 3 centimeter.
And the level was?
So what is it? N?
Sir, N2A.
Okay. So and what about the T? T stage?
Is
TX tumors.
TX, you cannot.
You could not find any tumor, no? In the PET scan, there is nothing. So C, TX, C, N1, N2A. Okay. And C, M0. Because the PET CT scan has not also showed any metastatic disease elsewhere, isn't it?
Yes.
So C, TX, C, N2A, C, M0. Okay.
You want to discuss the MRND? Neck dissection, you want to discuss that?
Right. So neck dissection. What are the types of neck dissection?
Yes, sir. And the first is radical neck dissection.
Very good. Propagated by?
Sir?
Propagated by who described radical neck dissection? You should know the name, just the name. It's good to know, not essential to know, but good to know.
What you should know?
Kreil. George Kreil, I think. Even before the radical mastectomy, I think 1891 or something, 1891 he said. Okay, then came the modification.
modified radical node dissection.
So how is it different from radical neck? What are the modifications?
Yes, sir. Modification, we preserve some of the structures in different types of modified radical neck dissections. Like type 1 is dissection of all the level 1 to 5 level of nodes.
Wait. Dissection of level 1 to 5 is done in all the radical neck dissection and all the modified radicals. You just tell me what is preserved. Modified
Type
radical
1.
type 1. What is
Type
preserved?
1 we preserve this spinal accessory nerve.
Very good. Type 2.
In type 2 we preserve the spinal accessory nerve along with internal jugular vein.
Very good. Type 3.
Type 3 is we preserve all the three structures. Spinal.
What are all three?
Spinal accessory, internal jugular, and sternocleidomastoid muscle.
Very good. Fine. Achha. What other types of neck dissection are there? So you have mentioned radical neck dissection. We have mentioned modified radical, where all levels from 1 to 5 are removed. But in modified radical, these three structures are preserved. Type 1, spinal accessory. Type 2, spinal accessory and IJV. Type 3, spinal accessory, IJV, and sternomastoid. What other types of neck dissections are there?
Sir, extended.
Forget extended. Nobody does extended. Go for the lesser.
Functional
or selective.
Selective neck dissection. Use the term selective neck dissection. There will not be any confusion. So here you are not removing all nodes from level 1 to 5. You are selecting some nodes. What are they? What are the types of selective neck dissections?
Suppose you are doing for tongue carcinoma, which is not having metastasis. People add a node dissection. What is done? A early tongue carcinoma, we are doing a selective node dissection. What are the things you should take?
Or should you do a selective node dissection? Early cancer, T1, N0. Should you do or not do? Quickly, if you don't know, say I don't know. We'll go on to the next.
In tongue, it is admissible and not admissible.
It should be done.
It should be done. Correct. The evidence for that comes from N0 trial. You read that up. N0 trial. Prophylactic versus the therapeutic neck dissection in early oral cancer, not just tongue, buccal mucosa, lip, floor of mouth, lower alveolus. Even if it is N0, you should do some kind of a neck dissection, which is a selective neck dissection. What is that for?
What will you remove?
What is that selective neck dissection?
Sir,
it is a supraomohyoid neck dissection. Since I think we are running short of time, I will tell you. It is a supraomohyoid neck dissection. So that is level 1, level 2, and level 3. For a tongue lesion, if it is slightly bigger, if it is a slightly lateral tongue lesion or a little posterior, you may also add you may do an anterolateral neck dissection, which is level 1 to level 4. Suppose you are doing for some suspected parotid tumor, or suppose you are doing it for a hypopharyngeal tumor, then you might have to do a level 2, 3, 4, 5. That is known as the posterolateral neck dissection. So these are all selective neck dissections where one particular lymph node group is not being removed. So it may be a supraomohyoid, it may be an anterolateral neck dissection, it may be a posterolateral neck dissection, things like that. Okay. So these are selective neck dissections. Okay. What are the various incisions that you can use for neck dissection?
First is Cril's incision.
Okay. Of course.
McAfee incision.
Can you describe? Not McAfee. McAfee is the antivirus. McAfee.
McAfee incision.
What is the McAfee incision?
So in McAfee incision, there are two horizontal incisions. First is the upper one. The first one starts from the mastoid and ends up anteriorly up to the chin. And the below the incision that starts from the anterior border of the trapezius.
No, I'm interrupting you slightly. Starting from the mastoid, ending in the chin. But there are several ways of joining the mastoid to the chin. I can just draw along the lower border of the mandible and join the mastoid to the chin. So where exactly is this line in the neck? You get my point. I can join the mastoid to the chin in several ways. I can make a deep curve. I can make a shallow curve. I can make a straight line.
Below the lower border of mandible.
That is what I'm asking.
2 centimeters below the.
So around 2.5 centimeter, an inch below the lower border of the mandible. So you have to add that. Just saying that joining the mastoid to the chin is not enough. It has to be a transverse line around an inch below the lower border of the mandible. Okay, that is the upper incision. What about the lower incision?
It starts from the anterior border of the trapezius and ends up to the suprasternal notch. And
again, at what level?
Again
what level?
2 centimeters above the clavicle
Okay, fine. Then what do? You have to lift up the flaps, and this is the middle part. Now there will be a middle bridge of skin, isn't it? There is the upper incision, there is the lower incision. This bridge of skin has to be rolled up and retracted, and you have to do the dissection from under this. So it is a somewhat cumbersome incision from the point of view of exposure. I very rarely use it. What is the advantage then? Why did they describe it? From the exposure point of view, it is not a good incision. The middle bridge of skin constantly hampers your movement. But it is still described, and it is also done in some cases. Why? It has got a good blood supply. The blood supply is not disrupted here. So in a post-radiation case, I told you that many of these cervical lymph nodes, unknown primary, they are treated with radical radiotherapy. But post-radiotherapy, you may need to do a salvage neck. Now, because of the radiation, the skin has poor vascularity. In these cases, a McPhee incision is useful. It preserves the vascularity and prevents the necrosis of the skin flap. Okay. Any other incisions you know?
Sir, double Y incision.
Horizontal with a S-shaped downward incision.
Then have you heard of any, for a normal oral cavity, suppose you want to do the lower alveolus composite resection or a buccal mucosa composite resection with neck nodal dissection, what is the most commonly used neck incision? That is the modified Schobinger. Modified Schobinger's incision. Suppose it is for hypopharynx or larynx. There is a laryngeal CA, there is a large neck node, or a hypopharyngeal CA, pyropharynx cancer with a large neck node. And the thing has invaded the thyroid cartilage. So it is not a candidate for radiotherapy. You have to do a laryngectomy and you have to do a neck dissection. Then what incision do you use? You use something known as a Sorensen's flap incision. Gluck Sorensen's flap incision, the apron incision. Gluck Sorensen apron incision. From one tip of mastoid to the other tip of mastoid, a lower curving incision with the lower border just around 2 centimeters above the sternal notch. Okay. So Gluck Sorensen incision. Suppose you want to do only one side, then you do a hockey stick or a utility incision. Because in future, these patients may present with a hypopharyngeal cancer, which may require hernia. So if you make a Kryle's incision, then future incision for the hypopharyngeal cancer will be impaired. So here you just make half of the Sorensen's incision, which is known as a hockey stick incision, starting from the tip of the mastoid, going down along the anterior border of the sternomastoid, and then curving transversely a little just above the sternal notch. So like a hockey stick. Okay. So these are the possible incisions. So you should know at least 4 or 5. So Kryle's, Schobinger's, apron incision, McPhee incision, utility or hockey stick incision. That is fine. Okay.
Can you tell me little about this? Suppose a metastatic node lower down at the level 4 or supraclavicular node, and the histology is adenoCA. What should you?
Then it is a much more problematic thing. Then you have to, as sir said, you have to look for, first of all, lung. Most common case will be lung, adenocarcinoma of the lung, or it can be below the diaphragm also, stomach, rarely colon, it can be pancreas. So obviously then you have to do you have to take the help of the pathologist. If the pathology comes out to be adenocarcinoma, but it is not impossible. It can be from the salivary glands also. It is not impossible that it is from head neck, but yes, it is a much stronger possibility that a level 4 adenocarcinoma is a infraclavicular pathology. So you have to treat it accordingly. Suppose it is lung or stomach, then obviously it becomes M1 disease, isn't it? So for M1 disease, then the treatment will essentially be palliative. It may rarely be adenocarcinoma of the esophagus. Lower end esophagus adenocarcinoma may present with a cervical lymphadenopathy, say around 4% or 5%. In that case, it is not palliative. It may still be treated with radical intent. You may give neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and if the nodes get downstage, then you can consider surgery, including a 3-field lymphadenectomy. If it is lung, again, then it becomes at least stage 3. Supraclav node, ipsilateral supraclav node is stage 3. So then the treatment will be chemoradiation.
Okay, well, Chandrakant, any role for doing Epstein-Barr virus antibody in this node?
That is very important. That is very important. I forgot that.
Recently, they have Epstein-Barr virus and HPV.
So, what is the implication? Suppose EBV virus antibody is positive. What is the implication?
EBV is associated with which cancer?
Lymphoma.
No. Nasopharyngeal cancer.
Nasopharynx. You have to remember HPV and EBV. HPV for oropharynx, EBV for nasopharynx.
Because they are the situations where you do not find a primary. Because they are because if you do all the investigation, till there are about 8 to 10% cases where you cannot localize the primary. So they are the more advanced investigations where you can have some pointers. Because at the end, if you don't find the primary, there is a role for giving blind radiation also. So if you can localize this in the hypopharynx or in the nasopharynx area, you can irradiate that area. And then
the site of the node will also, that is also a question. We could not cover it in one class. So suppose a level 2 node, that has some implication. If it is a level 5 node, that has another implication. Level 5, nasopharynx often presents with lower down lymphadenopathy. Surprisingly, although it is the highest mucosal subsite, it is not unusual for a nasopharyngeal cancer to present with a level 4 or a level 5 cervical lymphadenopathy. But it is very uncommon for an oral cavity to present with a level 5 without any nodes in the level 1 or 2. So if you get level 1A, so it is most likely to be oral cavity, either tongue or tip of the anterior tongue or lower alveolus or lip. If it is level 2, then it could be oral cavity, it could be oropharynx, it could be larynx. If it is level 3, it could be thyroid, it could be larynx, hypopharynx, and nasopharynx or oropharynx. Level 4 and 5, oral cavity will go out. You will get nasopharynx, oropharynx, hypopharynx, things like that, and infraclavicular pathology. So the site of the lymph node presentation will also give you some clue, a very broad clue. It is not very specific, but it will give you some clue. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what are the complications of neck dissection?
Yeah. Complications.
There are some immediate complications that can be like bleeding, and intraoperatively there can be injury to some important structures like carotid artery or
carotid artery. Achha, or nerves. Tell me the nerve damages, possible nerve damages in neck dissection. If you injure the carotid artery, then you are in big trouble.
Laryngeal nerve, recurrent laryngeal nerve.
For a classical neck dissection, you will not injure recurrent laryngeal nerve. No. Recurrent laryngeal nerve is injured in central compartment clearance. You do central compartment clearance only for thyroid and for parathyroid and some esophageal cancers. You may have to do a lower level 101, level 104. There you can injure the recurrent laryngeal. Please don't say injury to recurrent laryngeal nerve in a classical neck dissection. Classical neck dissection is level 1 to 5, not 6. No question of injuring the recurrent laryngeal in the classical neck dissection.
Look at the artificial groove if you are doing a lateral dissection.
What nerves? So many nerves. In the above, there is a marginal mandibular nerve. Okay, just below the mandible. When you are raising the upper skin flap and removing the level 1 nodes and the submandibular gland. The submandibular gland is also removed as part of neck dissection. Okay. So during that, you may injure the marginal mandibular branch of the facial nerve. Then, while doing the level 2 dissection, upper jugular, you will injure the spinal accessory. You can injure the spinal accessory that exits the skull base just lateral to the internal jugular vein. Okay.
Yes.
Then below, when you are doing level 3, 4, and 5, there are the trunks of the brachial plexus. Where do the trunks of the brachial plexus exit the neck? Between the scalenus anterior and the scalenus medius, isn't it? So there, when you are removing it, you have to stay above the facial covering, the prevertebral fascia layer. If you by chance go below the prevertebral fascia, then you have a chance of injuring the brachial plexus. You have a chance of damaging the phrenic nerve.
Where?
Okay.
Where do you find the phrenic nerve? There is a very nerve clearly seen in neck dissection, which is lying in front of the scalenus anticus. Scalenus anticus.
So the only structure which is going from lateral to medial, all other nerve structures are coming from medial to lateral, but the splenic nerve will go from the lateral border of the scalenus anterior, go along the anterior surface, and then hook around the medial border of the scalenus anterior. Okay. Achha, what else?
Okay. Sure, we have covered.
Run out of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very nice.
Okay.
These are basic things one should know. The level of nodes, anatomy of the nodes, possible primary sites, the approach for a case, what investigation you should do, and then the basic things about the level of nodes and the neck dissection. You have a very good. This is the usual discussion you have in DNB or MS examination. It's a very good discussion. Thank you, Shora.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
चलो